All right, we are going to work on building a perfect square trinomial. The next thing we're going to get into is called completing the square. But before we can actually do that, you have to know how to build a perfect square trinomial. So what I mean by that, you've seen some of these before. If you were to take x plus 6 times x plus 6. That's a perfect square. Why? Because it's the same thing times the same thing. Another way to write this would have been x plus 6 squared. It means the same thing. To see what this would be as a trinomial, do FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times 6 is plus 6x. That would be plus 6x. And that would be 36. Remember, these go together. So as a trinomial, this would be x squared plus 12x plus 36. What we want to do is figure out an easy way to get this number right here. So this is a perfect square trinomial. Anytime you graph a perfect square trinomial, it's going to be a graph that hits the x-axis one time, okay? And the reason is, if you were to set these equal to 0, you would only get one answer. Actually, it would be x equals negative 6. So we are going to work on building a perfect square trinomial, all right? So what we have here are some perfect square trinomials, okay? X squared plus 6x plus 9. If you were to factor it and try and find two numbers that when multiplied give you 9, but add up to 6, it would have to be 3 and 3. Now you can do FOIL to check it. You don't need to write it this way. Another way to write this would be x plus 3 squared, okay? But what we want to do is figure out, is there a pattern to get this last number. Remember, this last number is the c, the number in front of x is the b, the number in front of x squared is the a. If we take whatever the b number is, divide it by 2, and square it, let's see if it gives us the c. Well, if this b was 6, divided by 2, wouldn't that be 3? And what is 3 squared? 3 squared is equal to 9. So it looks like it worked, okay? All right, second example is a perfect square trinomial. I need two numbers that when multiplied give me a positive 25 but add up to a negative 10. And remember, there was a rule when this was a minus but that was a plus. Both signs had to be minuses. Well, the only way to multiply and get two numbers that equal 25 but add up to a negative 10 would be x minus 5 times x minus 5. Okay? So that is a perfect square trinomial. Why? Because it's the same thing times itself. If you didn't want to write x minus 5 twice, you could write x minus 5 in parentheses and then square it. Now, let's also see what happens. What if I were to take this negative 10, which is b, and divide it by 2 and square it? Well, negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. What is negative 5 squared? Remember, that's negative 5 times negative 5. That is a positive 25. Anytime you take b, divide it by 2, and square it, it will always give you c, if it's a perfect square trinomial. All right, look at the last one. This is also a perfect square trinomial. Two numbers that when multiplied give you 36, but add up to 12. Well, I like 6 and 6. All pluses, all pluses. All right, 6 times 6 is 36, and 6x plus 6x is 12x. But let's also see if we take whatever the b number is, which is 12, divide it by 2 and square it. See if it gives us that c term. 12 divided by 2 is 6. What's 6 squared? 36. It has to work, okay? So, and again, this is all about building a perfect square. All right, so here's what the problems are going to look like. You guys will have an assignment later, and they're going to leave the c blank. You've got to figure out what number would have to go there in order for this to be a perfect square trinomial. Well, it's pretty simple. You take whatever b is, which is 14, divide it by 2, and square it. So if b is 14, 14 divided by 2 is 7. What is 7 squared? 49. that number must be 49. There's your perfect square trinomial right there, okay? You can do this with any number. It does not matter. X squared plus 16x plus blank. What has to go in that blank space there? Take 16 divided by 2 and square it. 16 divided by 2 is 8. What is 8 squared? 64. Put 64, that's your perfect square trinomial. Has to work. If you want to graph it, it will only hit the x-axis one time. Perfect square trinomials only hit the x-axis one time, always, okay? All right. So let's make some of these here. Here's some examples here. They gave you the A, they gave you the B, they didn't give you the C. It doesn't matter. All you need is B divided by 2 and square it. So let's look at this first one here. B is 20. So let's do 20 divided by 2 and square it. 20 divided by 2 is 10. What is 10 squared? 10 times 10 is 100. There's your missing number right there. You'll see problems just like this on your assignment later. Look at number 2. It doesn't matter if it's negative. B is negative 4 in this example. Negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. What is a negative 2 squared? That's negative 2 times negative 2. It's always positive. Notice these signs here are always positive. Now, what if that number is not an even number? It was easy to divide 20 by 2 and easy to divide 4 by 2. If it's an odd number, don't worry about it. Leave it like a fraction. So I need to take B and divide it by 2 and square it. Okay, well in this case, B is 5, so do 5 divided by 2 and square it. Don't even turn it into a decimal. Leave it that way. What does 5 over 2 squared mean? 5 over 2 times 5 over 2. How do you multiply fractions? Multiply top by top. 5 times 5 is 25. 2 times 2 is 4. There's your answer. Leave it just like that. A perfect square trinomial always has a perfect square on this end and a perfect square on that end. 25 over 4 is a perfect square because 25 is a perfect square and 4 is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square because the square root of 4 is 2, and 100 is a perfect square because the square root of 100 is 10. All right? All right, same thing. If they gave you the first two terms, the A and the B, and you had to find the C, take that number, divide it by 2, and square it. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. What is 6 squared? 36. So it must be plus 36. That's what's missing. Okay? Take 14 divided by 2, square it. 14 divided by 2 is 7. What is 7 squared? Plus 49. Notice how it's always plus 49. Look at the B in this one. It's a negative 10. Does not matter. Anytime you square a negative, it's a positive. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. What is negative 5 squared? Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. There's that odd number again. If you get a 5, don't worry about it. Leave it as a fraction. What is 5 over 2 squared? That's 5 over 2 times 5 over 2. That's 25 over 4. We just did that one. But you can have any odd number divided by 2 and leave it as a fraction. So it's plus 25 over 4. All of these examples are perfect square trinomials. If you want to graph them,